Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Well, I'm very pleased to say that my Origins of Ruth video has gone over very well. I'm very pleased with how that's come out. So I figure, hey, let's do more of that. Let's talk about some of my legend characters and what inspired them, how I came up with them, how I structured them, and where I wanted to take their characters. And today I thought we'd hit the either most popular or next most popular character besides Ruth that I've created, Richard Blackthorne, my Lawbringer character. A lot of people really like this character, and I'm glad for it. I'm very happy for it. Richard is one of my favorites as well. You can probably tell because he constantly makes cameos in other stories, particularly samurai ones. Like, he just showed up in the recent Sohei legend that I made. So I'm really glad that he's become so popular. I really, really am. So you're probably wondering, okay, how did I come up with him? What went into that? Well, first of all, I wanted to do something similar to Ruth, where, Ruth is the story of this Viking girl who was raised by knights and thus became a knight herself. I wanted to do something similar where I had a knight who became a samurai, but I didn't want to just repeat what I did with Ruth, Ruth was her own thing. I wanted to make a new thing. Instead of just this knight boy being adopted by a kensei and then raised to become a kensei or shugoki or sohei himself, he is a knight whose honor led him to join the samurai, which I thought would be a really weird but unique take, and I think Richard came out very well as a result. So how did I approach it? The first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to embody the idea of honor for this Lawbringer. Honor is a point of contention in For Honor because I think a lot of factions, even individuals within factions, have very different takes on what honor is. What does it mean to fight and uphold your honor and duty and all that kind of stuff. So how do they do it? With Richard, I started off by wanting to make it so that he was this boy who witnessed warfare and believed firmly that he had to fight to protect the weak, had to fight to protect his family, his sister, his mother, his father. He wanted to protect the people. And, he wanted to embody what it means to be a lawbringer. And the other thing I wanted to do with this story is embody what makes a lawbringer stand out. What do they do? Which is where I came up with the idea that a lawbringer isn't just a knight. They are judges. They're executioners. They actually think of them kind of like chaplains in Space Marine chapters in Warhammer 40k. Their job is to keep an eye on the knights and make sure that they're following the rules, that they're doing what they're supposed to do. The Lawbringers uphold law and order. That is their job. It is their sacred duty. It's what a Lawbringer is meant to do. And so Richard takes to this with alacrity. So, keeping in mind his sense of honor, I wanted him to be exposed to the samurai and see how they suffer. And then him recognize through that there are other people besides the Ashfeldians who suffer due to war. Now, I'm not dissing or, making light of what the Ashfeldians go through. Many Ashfeld peasants go through tough stuff too. But Richard probably looks at all this and thinks, maybe these people need help too. So I had it where he comes upon a samurai village, and we set it up where he was part of a detachment of knights sent to go fight a war against Horkos, and he gets separated from his group, he gets injured, and he gets found and taken into this village where they treat his wounds, and he sees what they're going through, and they're begging him to stay and help, like, oh, you could be our savior, like, you could be the one to help us. And he's like, I can't be your savior, I can't help you because I'm a knight of Ashfeld, like, I'm here to fight Horkos. And then they reveal to him, your group, the people you were fighting with, have pulled out, they've kind of left. They don't see this as worth fighting for, and the Horkos soldiers are coming, they're going to be here soon. And Richard at first is kind of like, this isn't my problem, this isn't my issue. But then again, he remembers his honor, that honor we were talking about earlier, the point of bringing law where it needs to be. And he starts to recognize, bringing law and order does not mean that I only bring it to Ashfeld or to the Knights. I bring it everywhere I go. And these people need me right now. So I would be betraying my honor and betraying all my oaths if I turn my back on these people right now, because I don't just fight for Ashfeld. I fight for justice. I fight for order. I fight to protect the weak. And if I betray them now, then I am no better than the monsters that I'm supposed to slay. So he decides, I'm going to help. But then it turns into this last stand kind of thing. Like, he recognizes that it's just him and a handful of Nobushi and Oromusha, maybe some minor peasant fighters who are willing to pick up some spears and pitchforks. And he comes up with a plan to stop them at the coast, setting up mines like the samurai do and trying to trap them. And thus, wearing his dark black armor in the sunrise as the enemy comes abroad, he takes them on as the Black Dragon. Because as explosions from the mines go off everywhere, the samurai see this knight wreathed in flames and, shining glossy black armor with a, poleaxe that's cutting down his foes like the talons of a great wyvern. They just see the Black Dragon that is Richard Blackthorne. And some of you are probably wondering about the name. Let me finish this and then I'll get into that, because the name does have an origin. There is a meaning behind the name. So after he saves the village almost single-handedly, yes, he does give a really cool speech, and I'll explain where that came from as well. But afterwards, they want to thank him. They're so appreciative. It's so awesome what he did. And then the emperor or empress of the Mire, I believe it's Ayu now, probably looks to Blackthorne and goes, we got a place for you here. And Blackthorne thinks, they need me. They need me here. They need a strong hand. And so he becomes the very first foreign daimyo of the Mire, and thus the Black Dragon has become a very renowned daimyo within the Mire. And I thought that'd be a very creative direction. He's still a lawbringer. It's not like he gave up his position or status to do this. He's still a lawbringer. He still brings justice. He still protects the weak, but he is doing it for Ashfeld now because this village, this province needs him, and through him he strengthens it, making it something better and stronger than it was before, a force to be reckoned with and recognized. And I thought that would be a very cool direction to take with who Richard Blackthorne is and what he's meant to represent. So that is where I went with that. Now, as for the name, there are two parts of it. First is Richard and then Blackthorne. Richard, I got the idea from King Richard the Lionheart, who historically was a king of England who went on the Third Crusade, and by all accounts he was described not only as a great warrior and military leader, but also as I wouldn't say good, compassionate individual, but an honorable man. He was considered an honorable individual by all accounts, and because of that, I wanted to embody some of that honor here, going into a foreign land and displaying that same honor. And then you have Blackthorne. Some of you may get that, some of you may not, but I am a big fan of the book by James Clavell, Shogun. Shogun is a book that is a fictionalized retelling of the exploits of the real historical individual William Adams. William Adams was a Dutch Protestant navigator or sailor who ended up crash landing on Japan just before the Edo period kicks into full swing, and he becomes friends with Tokugawa Ieyasu, and through their relationship, he becomes the first European samurai, thus making him one of the first foreign samurai out there. A very fascinating figure in history, and his story has been fictionalized and retold in the story Shogun, and there's a lot of stuff in it that's not historically accurate. That's why he changed a lot of the names, including William Adams's name, which is now John Blackthorne. That's where the last name comes from, Blackthorne. It's a direct reference to Shogun. And some of you may be familiar with the TV show Shogun, which has come out recently. I think it's okay, but I prefer the miniseries that came out years ago. It's so much better, in my opinion. It's just so much better. But regardless of that, that's just my opinion. I'm not here to critique or anything like that. My point is, that's where I got the name from. So Richard Blackthorne had the origins from Richard the Lionheart and John Blackthorne, one from history, the other from Shogun, because this really is an example of a knight who became a daimyo, who became a samurai. And I thought that was such a fun idea, such a neat direction to take. So that's where the name comes from. Now, as for the speech, some of you remember that speech that he gave near the end where he says, where he talks about, in sin, I am justice, and that kind of thing. That was honestly, I'll be real honest, that came from Batman. Because, I am vengeance. I am the knight. That's honestly where I got the idea from. I just made it something my own. I thought if a lawbringer were to give his oaths, because if you remember, Ruth had to make her own oaths. If a lawbringer had oaths to swear to, what would his oaths sound like? And I just thought those would sound like good oaths. So that's where I got the idea for that. That's honestly where I got the idea. Now, what I wanted to do with Richard after I created him, I wasn't sure how much more I'd be able to go into his story, but one thing that I realized very quickly is that the cool thing about Richard Blackthorne is that because he's a daimyo with his own province and samurai to serve with and under him, and samurai that would probably want to fight against him, he probably would relate to a lot of other legend characters. So inevitably, other samurai legends started popping up, and thus Richard started connecting to a lot of them. Like, for example, he marries a shinobi. Many of you are familiar with the shinobi legend, who we'll talk about later if y'all would like. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to hear more about her. But he marries a shinobi. He is friends with an Aramusha. He actually meets my Sohei character. He begins meeting all these samurai characters that I have created. And as a result, Richard kind of puts his hands into a lot of other legends. Not that he's directly creating them, but he's influencing them and becoming an important key role in their stories, which I think was not what I initially intended, but it tracked very well. It became something very easy to connect, and thus Richard has become a central character for a lot of people and for a lot of the legends, which is why I think so many people like him so much. And I think it's very fitting, because, you know, when I first created Richard Blackthorne, Lawbringer was such a weak character overall in the game, but now he's become so much stronger. He's actually more of an A or S tier character now, I would say, because he's so much better off than he was. I'm so pleased with where he's gotten. And you know what? That's kind of what happened with Richard Blackthorne. Kind of a simple story that I didn't think would go anywhere, that I was kind of like, I'm just kind of, you know, throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And not only did it stick well, not only did it come out very well, but Richard has kind of exploded into a character that I was not expecting. Even more than Ruth, Richard is able to kind of meld into other characters' legends and stories. He has a place in the realm of all the legends that I've created. And I've had a lot of people come to me saying, hey, would it be possible if, you know, I added Richard to my own legend, or if I made a legend that referenced Richard as well? And in answer to that question, I'll go ahead and answer it here. I don't mind if you do. I really don't mind if you do. But all I ask is two things. Number one, keep Richard and his relationship central. Don't try to steal his wife or nothing, you know what I'm saying? And two, don't make him out to be, you know, a weakling or weaker than the character that you present. And what I mean by that is, don't disrespect the character. Don't disrespect who I made them to be. That's all I ask, you know, like, because I always feel like that's kind of a cheap shot. Like if I were to create a superhero character and introduce them into the DC universe, and then I have them just beat Superman. Like, are you kidding? Like, yeah, I've proven my character is super powerful, but I've also devalued Superman as a result. Don't do that. Don't pull a Star Wars sequel trilogy on me. But no, back to Richard Blackthorne. In terms of his overall design, I changed his design a couple times when I was building him, and I've settled on a more black, sleek design for his overall armor because he is the Black Dragon. That's kind of that's kind of obvious. But when it comes to his weapon, the weapon hasn't changed at all. It is the winged harpy set. Just because I think that design fits so beautifully. It's such an intricate, stylized design. And I don't know, there's something about it that just works really well. It works really well. Actually, funny enough, I thought about giving him the Black Dragon effect, like the mask effect, but at the same time I thought it was a little bit too overkill. I'm not one of those people who really likes using a lot of crazy effects. The only effect that I've really used on him is the flaming effect for his idol, because again, that's how he was seen by the samurai, this individual who was surrounded by fire, who was baptized in the dragon's fire, and I thought that fit really, really well. So that essentially is how I built Richard Blackthorne, where he came from, what inspired him, how he ended up where he is. And like I said, guys, if you enjoy Richard Blackthorne's legend, let me know down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've added him to your own legends, let me know. I'd love to know what you did with him and how he related to your characters. And let me know what your favorite part was that Richard did. Was it in his own legend or was it in someone else's legend, like the Shinobi, Aramusha, or Sohei? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And to answer your final question, will he make an appearance in the Legend of Nobushi? I can't tell you that just yet because that is going to be a little bit of a surprise. But know that I am very excited to share that with you. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.